is cue ball hitting another cue ball empirical proof of causation? No, because only if causation is the case is it empirical proof of causation, and that data itself from sense data is not telling you causation. So Hume's critique is to critique on empiricist basis the principle of causation as a metaphysical principle. The fact that you see billiard ball A hitting billiard ball B and you're calling that causation, if you're an empiricist, I'm not an empiricist. We're not empiricists. I'm not agreeing with David Hume as a skeptic. On empiricist grounds, you don't have a basis to believe in causation. That's Hume's argument. So if you're an empiricist, if you have an empiricist starting point, Aquinas, Aristotle, foundationalist, Trent Horn, the fact that you see event A and event B does not give you access to a universal principle of causation. Do you see the difference? Hume is saying that when you see this happen, event A hitting, or ball A hits ball B, you say that's causation. There's nothing in that event itself as an empiricist through the pure sense data that tells you that there is a universal principle of causation, or that event is, quote, causation. Where in that event, yes, I see it. The word causation, it appeared above the two billiard balls. There it is. You're calling it causation. You're saying it has a metaphysical existence. What is the justification for that? Okay. It's not saying there's no causation. I'm not trying to be mean to you, but so many people, when they hear these arguments, they think I'm saying or denying causation. They think I'm accepting Hume. I'm saying on epistemological, epistemic grounds, on empiricist grounds, the epistemological critique is that you can't justify the belief in causation. I'm not saying there's no causation.
If I go touch a chair and I can feel the wood and I can look at the legs I'm seeing with my eyes, how is that not saying that I'm empirically sense dating this object, so therefore the self has to be a proof fact? I don't, because
you're assuming all of these things that have not yet been proven. So remember, a brute fact is
but I can see it though. Like
that's begging the question. Hold on, let's take some examples, and Father Deacon's really good on this too, so I'll let him speak in a second. But I mean, you're assuming that you're seeing something like this occur. So you are receiving sense data impressions from an external object, but this event itself does not tell you that there's a meaningful external world with this meaningful object that is imprinting causally this sense data upon you. You're just assuming that. There's an event occurring, there's a sense data occurring, and you are interpreting it as the chair in the external world that is causing that. That's an invalid leap that you can't justify.
Okay, well, how does that not lead to like this, like, Buddhist, Hindu, like everything's an illusion?
No, I'm not. You're confusing the argument with adopting the whole position. I'm just making the point against a foundationalist epistemology that David Hume would make. That doesn't mean I'm adopting David Hume skepticism. The point is that there's no justification for that view given the empiricist starting point. In other words, you want to be an empiricist. You want to. That's what you're. See, a lot of people don't understand that when you have this view, you got to take the empiricist system as a whole. Right. Yeah, let's look at another way to argue this too, which I was thinking about the other day when I read Father Deacon's Quine paper. So. There's no, even if we wanted to say or think that there was some epistemic bootstrapping project that was possible, that we could achieve a kind of purely neutral, objective, raw impression of sense data, right? The idea that this could be done, first of all, we've kind of already shown isn't really possible on the empiricist starting point. But even if we did think that we could do like some version of this, let's give an example of something that is presupposed here that we may not have noticed, that we're invalid in concluding. So let's say that we have an individual who is engaging in the touching of a chair, right? Touch this chair, baby. We have sense data impression number 1. Oh, I touched the chair; it was solid. And then sense data impression number 2. I moved my hand down the smooth back of the chair, and the place where your back rests is actually really smooth, and it's different. So sense data impression number 2, and then we have sense data impression number 3. I lifted the chair up, and it seemed to weigh 30 pounds. And so you've got this, what seems to be, you think, raw sense data impressions imprinting upon you from, right, this external object chair out here in the world. So here's the hand. Here's your lusty hand thrusting at this chair, and then the chair is. You think the chair is causally, right, imprinting the sense data upon you. Well, let's not even get into the fact that we don't know what a you is, right? What is this you that's receiving the sense data? Look at this invalid leap from this series of events here. I'm assuming that in this raw sense data number 1, that there was some meaningful impression from an object in the external world that is the same object in sense data impression number 2. But I don't know that. I've just assumed that. And the fact that one event temporally succeeded another event does not prove that it's the same object out there. Now you might say, well, you're being ridiculous. Nobody really thinks that it's different objects. Oh, really? But my point here is that to go from sense data impression number 1 to sense data impression number 2, as if there is a shared thing between 1 and 2, and yet at the same time, these are two distinct events, right? But I'm pulling out distinct properties from a single object. That's a non sequitur. In other words, I am doing pattern recognition, assuming that there's qualities and properties in this object, and that's going beyond the raw sense data that I was supposed to be just receiving. In other words, the raw data here, to assume that it has a pattern recognition status with the raw data here, is an invalid move. That's a leap. The sense data does not grant the leap from 1 to 2 or from 2 to 3, or that all of these three share some commonality. Do you see that?
There's no way to obtain knowledge or learn about the external world without assumptions.
Sure.
And so why could they not reverse that on us and say, well, how do you know?
This,
blah, blah, blah,
bro, right. So all we're doing is showing that their empiricist starting point doesn't work. I'm not saying that there's no commonality between these events. There is. But I don't have the problem because I don't have their worldview. That's the problem with their worldview.
Right.
So they can't turn it on us because I would just say, well, I'm not an empiricist. So the problems aren't a problem for me because I believe in all these categories and metaphysical principles. You are saying that you don't believe in all these metaphysical things and these conclusions. You're saying that you can't validate these metaphysical claims, and then you're using all these metaphysical claims to even make a claim that there is a, quote, meaningful sense data impression. You can't.
Okay.
That's the point.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And remember what knowledge, kind of the traditional sense, actually is. It's not just having the correct belief, a true belief, but having the justification for it.
Yeah.
So
we can justify it, and they can't.
No.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, if they just say, "Oh, because I have these," how do I actually determine that my belief is true? In other words, what are my right reasons? Oh, just a set of further unjustified assumptions that I've just made up or that I can't defend. Like, how is that a justification? And if you're basing your arrival or assent of that true belief based on a belief that's unjustified, then you don't have knowledge from your position. That's all we're pointing out. So we're not pointing out that your belief is about that there's external world, et cetera, is false. We're just saying, from your assumptions and starting points, you're unjustified, and you can't actually assert that it is a true belief because you have no justification for it. That's all we're pointing out.
I'm not saying there's no knowledge. I'm saying on your position, there's no knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, great questions. So Quine's resolution is, let's just give up justification. In other words, we're going to surrender this. And he says, let's move into psychology, psychologism, pragmatism. That's it. Now, in Father Deacon's paper, he gets into critiquing whether Quine actually has a coherent move when he does that, and in fact that will break down, and we will get into that paper in the near future when we look at his Father Deacon's response and critique, because obviously this will not work. I mean, if we're going to surrender justification and objectivity, logic, argumentation, rationality, and we're just doing psychology, then now we're in the dilemma of psychologism. And by the way, debate becomes impossible. So that comes at a heavy cost. Okay, there's no such thing as debate anymore. We're surrendering truth value, standards, objectivity. I mean, that's all out the window. So if the atheist wants to go in that route, if he's going to be consistent, then he's got to drop the microphone. He has there's no way he can argue. This is the surrendering of argumentation, you see. Because now no claims can be justified. If no claims can be justified, then debate is impossible. You have no argument to make. Anytime you argue, you will be violating your presupposition.